The Return of Annabelle. The Army of Djinns and the Viking Massacre. Chapter 1. Darkness in History. Long ago, somewhere between legends and reality, Annabelle, the cursed doll who had been trapped in the darkness of an abandoned house for centuries, awoke. The dark powers that had been imprisoned in her decaying, empty body had never disappeared. For centuries, Annabelle had slept, but in the darkest nights, the forces from the underworld began to stir, awakening her. One stormy night in the northern lands where no human dared tread, Annabelle arose from her slumber. In the thick darkness, as the pale moonlight barely pierced through the storm clouds, she emerged as a terrifying, demonic figure. Her eyes, like two bottomless black pits, gleamed with a malevolent glow, and her voice, barely a whisper, sounded like the murmurs of the dead. This is the time of return. Her voice echoed like a cold wind, and with it, the spirits from the underworld began to emerge. The army of Djinns, long hidden in ancient ruins and mysterious caves, answered her call. These Djinns were no ordinary spirits. They were terrifying and powerful beings with extraordinary magical abilities. As they walked upon the earth, the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the trees bent and fell under their presence. Chapter 2. The Power of Annabelle and the Army of Djinns. In the depths of darkness, the Djinns appeared like sorrowful wraiths. Their bodies were translucent and magnetic, exuding an aura of darkness that seemed to seep from their very souls. Their eyes, burning with an otherworldly fire, created an unnatural light. But instead of providing clarity, it was an omen of doom. The wind howled as they approached. Annabelle commanded, "Take the villages, kill the lives." The wails of Djinns filled the air as they descended upon the villages. Buildings crumbled as if made of sand, and trees were uprooted with ease. No one could escape the terrifying army. When Annabelle unleashed a new magical force, she raised the spirits of fallen warriors, those who had died in past battles. These spirits, known as the fiercest and most merciless warriors in history, became her servants. Alongside the Djinns, they used their spectral powers and blood-soaked weapons to destroy everything in their path. Chapter 3. The Vikings and the Terrifying Attack. The Vikings, who were in the midst of their conquests and wars, had no knowledge of this emerging darkness. They were engrossed in their own triumphs, unaware of the nightmare that awaited them. One night, as they rested in their fortress, strange wails echoed through the woods. The sounds of footsteps, like the rustling of 1,000 wraiths, disturbed their sleep. One Viking, floating over a lake, suddenly heard a whisper from the dark. "Beware of the one who follows you." Before he could understand the threat, Djinns emerged from the shadows and attacked. The terror in his face was palpable. In a single moment, his scream was silenced as his blood ran dry. Soon, the Vikings realized they were facing a threat unlike any they had ever encountered. Annabelle's army, with their ghosts and Djinns, swept through the land, unstoppable and merciless. Chapter 4. The Final Battle in the Heart of Darkness. In the final fortress, the Vikings made their last stand. But Annabelle and her army of Djinns stormed the fortress under the cover of a dark night. The battlefield became a hellish slaughterhouse, with Djinns attacking mercilessly. The sound of steel on steel filled the air, but none of the Vikings' weapons could harm these spectral enemies. The Djinns were unstoppable, as if they were the very embodiment of death itself. Annabelle, standing high above, watched the massacre unfold. Her face, a terrifying mask of pure evil, smiled as her enemies fell. When the last Viking warrior fell, a chilling silence fell over the battlefield. The Vikings were no more. Chapter 5. Bjorn Ironside, Breaking the Will Before Darkness. In the final moments of the battle, Bjorn Ironside, known for his fearsome strength, was the last hope for the Vikings. He fought with ferocity, his iron sword striking down Djinns and ghosts. But nothing could prepare him for the true terror that was to come. As the Djinns and spirits overwhelmed the Viking defenses, Bjorn fought with everything he had, but even his might was no match for Annabelle's power. The dark spirits surrounded him, and as they closed in, Bjorn was overwhelmed. In a final moment of despair, Annabelle appeared before him, her eyes as black as death. She spoke in a cold, chilling tone. "You are no longer iron. You are but ashes before me." Bjorn, broken and helpless, felt his strength drain from him as the dark forces consumed him. In Chapter 6, Battle with the Spirits. Bjorn struggled to hold onto his sword, but it was no use. The spirits of ancient warriors, long dead, had risen and surrounded him. The Djinns, with their terrifying powers, attacked relentlessly. Bjorn's strength began to fail him, and his body grew heavy as if the very life was being drained from him. Annabelle, watching from afar, sent the spirits to finish him. In one final moment, Bjorn fell to his knees, his sword dropping from his grasp. His scream was silenced by the chilling winds of the night as the darkness swallowed him whole. His once indomitable spirit was crushed under the weight of Annabelle's curse, and the Viking legend of Bjorn Ironside came to a gruesome end. Chapter 7. The Fall of the Vikings and the Triumph of Darkness. With Bjorn's death, the last flicker of hope for the Vikings was extinguished. The battle had been lost, and the forces of Annabelle, with their army of Djinns and vengeful spirits, had claimed victory. The once mighty Viking warriors, whose names had struck fear into the hearts of their enemies, were now nothing more than lifeless corpses strewn across the blood-soaked battlefield. Annabelle, her eyes burning with the fire of triumph, stood at the crest of the hill, overlooking the wreckage of the Viking forces. Her sinister smile spread across her face as the last of the life drained from her enemies. She raised her hand, and the Djinns, along with the restless spirits of the fallen, knelt before her, as if in worship. The land had fallen into eternal darkness. The villages that had once thrived with the strength of Viking warriors were now silent, their people either dead or enslaved by the dark magic of Annabelle's army. The earth itself seemed to mourn, as trees withered, rivers dried up, and the winds whispered of the terrible fate that had befallen the land. Annabelle had done more than just conquer. She had wiped out the last remnants of resistance. Her Djinns and the spirits of the vengeful warriors now ruled over the desolate remains, ensuring that no spark of hope or defiance would ever rise again. As Annabelle and her army moved onward, the world around her seemed to wither away. The once proud and terrifying Viking civilization, with its fearless warriors and vast kingdoms, had been reduced to nothing. The last cries of the fallen Vikings echoed in the void, drowned out by the triumphant, unholy laughter of Annabelle. She had accomplished her goal. The world was hers, and she, with her army of Djinns and dark spirits, would reign over it for eternity. There would be no more wars, no more battles, no more heroes rising to challenge her. The era of darkness had begun, and Annabelle was its ruler. The land was silent now, save for the wind that carried the mournful cries of the lost. It was a silence that would last for all eternity, as the once vibrant world was consumed by the unrelenting, ever-present shadow of Annabelle's reign. This concludes the tale of Annabelle's return and the fall of the Viking Empire to her army of Djinns and dark spirits.